Good morning. Welcome to our special meeting of Municipal Council on Tuesday, February 12th, 2019. I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time and ask if there's any declarations of interest. Seeing none, I will move to deputations, and I do not have any listed. We will move to item D, and that would be presentations. And we are in workshop today, but it's listed as a separate item. Councillor Morton has indicated that she will be late arriving. We will make a note of that, Mr. Clerk, please. And with that, I will turn the workshop over to our CAO, Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Mayor Haxon, and this is our first scheduled special council workshop of 2019. It's the first workshop of this council term, so it's something we've been looking forward to. A couple of advisements right now, and I hope the live streaming is working, so that'll further help get the word out. But after consultation with yourself, Madam Mayor, we're in the middle of a major storm event today. There's a number of closures right now, particularly in the city of Toronto. Our operations group uses state-of-the-art weather monitoring, and we've checked with our manager of operations, and conditions are expected to deteriorate greatly in the afternoon. And there's freezing rain predicted on top of the snow accumulation. For the safety of all, including our public, council, staff, we are proposing and have not only proposing, what we've done is we are going to proceed with the growth management component of this workshop till noon. The components scheduled for this afternoon being the Integrity Commissioner, discussion of Code of Conduct, and the strategic plan discussion will be deferred and rescheduled. We are as well looking at our municipal facilities. We're in playoff hockey season, and a number of teams will be traveling great distances, and we would like to provide some clarity on that situation. We certainly don't want folks putting their lives at risk to get to sporting events. Our library will be part of that as well. So Mr. Karmazin's group is closely monitoring the activity of other municipalities with regards to the municipal facilities. And we will provide a further advisement on our municipal operations around midday. So I'd like to start with that. So if we could now proceed with the workshop, Madam Mayor. Please. Staff have spent a great deal of time. We've had a number of our growth management workshops over the years, and I'm just going to provide a very brief introduction, and then each of our areas, of our department areas that provide services to our residents and public, will be providing an updated area. So if I could ask to advance to the first slide. This is something we're very, very proud of, this one page. There's a great deal of work that goes in behind it, and this was part of an award-winning initiative where we're under Mr. Valchich's area in corporate services, but our information technology group in a multi-department initiative developed what's called as our growth management development dashboard. It was recognized at CAMA, the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, and it was actually recognized internationally as well as an award-winning proactive initiative from East Gwillimbury. What I'd like to do is summarize our growth here of what we're projected, and I'll start at the bottom. As we entered into our initial phase of York-Durham sewage system, and I'd like to clarify that the York-Durham sewage system is the system that discharges at the Duffin Creek plant in Pickering. So importantly, as businesses and residents have flush toilets, they travel a great distance to be treated and discharged. And it's quite a magnificent, sophisticated system to travel that distance. We started this growth curve at approximately 25,000 residents, and the 7,900 units that we've have as allocation, there's some important factors to mention up front. The infrastructure required for that was provided by the very homes that you see being built. The developers had to front end millions of dollars to improve the road and the sewage system. And the York Region obviously has invested, I think, about $350 million in our community as well to allow this to happen. Those 7,900 units, approximately three people live in each home. With us, it's probably a little higher, but essentially what you see with that 7,900 units is our community is going to double. We're going to go from about 25,000 people to just under 50,000 people, and that's pretty significant growth. The second area I'd like to cover off is how many building permits have we actually issued. And we, up until 2018, we're in the middle of what was probably the most significant real estate movement in Ontario as far as real estate sales and transactions. And we had 2,855 sales and building permits issued for those units. And that represents approximately 36% of our growth. We're going to talk about today the balance representing about 5,000 units, and we'll have an update on what kind of projection we see on those as well. So this is a fantastic tool for us. The other thing it's really important is the occupancy permits. We've had 2,500 new families join us in this community, and that certainly has added to our service mandate as well. And importantly, in the orange, and this is related to MPAC and sometimes the role, but each of those homes is paying property taxes, and the taxes are approximately 1,500 of them are on the roll at this point, and with the balance to come in fairly short order. One of the things you'll be hearing today is up till now there's been a focus on residential. This is a residential development dashboard, and in accordance with this term of council, with a real focus on economic development, job creation, staff are currently building a non-residential development dashboard, and it's something that we hope will allow us to aggressively pursue good jobs and to monitor and manage that growth as well. So I think we're off to a good start there. Next slide, please. This development dashboard has many layers to it. It's more than just a static sheet. The statistics get updated every evening, and the development dashboard links into our GIS system, so it shows roads, it shows development occupancies. This is just a little bit of a flavor for the kind of stuff. It even shows fire break lots to the level of that, and so it's some real interesting data that we can get off of each of the homes and businesses that are locating here. I just wanted to move to the growth projections from a very high level right now, and then just to cover off, and I'll pass it over to our General Manager of Development Services. But what you can see is a little bit of thematic of where we are right now. As we sit in this room, we have approximately 32,000 residents, 10,000 jobs. And you can see our growth moving forward, but one of the things that we've said is we feel that the balance of the 5,200 units will get us approximately about a 10-year growth. Now, that's very difficult to predict. It's cyclical, it's market dependent, but it certainly gives us a great mandate for moving ahead. If you look historically at how Newmarket and Aurora grew in a period where there was no infrastructure constraints, and the town of Aurora traditionally grew at about 400 new homes a year, and the town of Newmarket grew at about 600 new homes a year. And at this point in time, we're projecting about 500 new homes get sold and occupied over the next 10-year period. And the other thing, very importantly, is this the next phase of growth, and you're going to hear about that as well. And till now, there's been a lot of discussion about the Upper York sewage system. There was at the request of the province, the governing party at the time, there was a decision or a directive to York Region to look at Lake Simcoe as a receiving body. There was an environmental assessment, multi-year. I believe the region expended about $30 million on that EA. And I think right now close to approximately $100 million has been spent on the Upper York as the solution. And at this point in time, it still sits on a minister's desk at the province awaiting approval. And we have introduced the notion, and we don't want to be bold, about maybe there is other alternatives other than the Upper York that may have to be looked at as part of this, but we certainly don't want to present that the Upper York's being abandoned, and we continually to work very much in partnership with York Region and their staff and leadership of Chair Emerson. What you can see is at some point right now, the latest projections from the region have it at 2026 for potential construction. That seems to be, at one point it was actually, if we were sitting in this room when the Upper York was originally being discussed, it would have been built by now. It was 2018 at one point. And then it got pushed out to 2022. Its latest now is 2026 if it had a timely approval. That would be, so that's why we have that date there. And we really now, with our next official plan update, are looking at a 2041 timeframe. And as you'll see, we're still looking at potentially moving to a community of about 90,000 people in that time frame. And one of the things that you will see is if you look at the job ratio in 2018, as we sit here in this room, we have for each resident, we have about 0.3 job. So the 32,000 residents is about 10,000 employment. You can see moving forward that the 2041 is almost for every resident you have, every 2 residents you have 1 job. And that's another reason for us having such a focus on economic development, job creation, and getting good jobs so that people aren't having to leave our community to work, but can actually live here and work here and invest and play here as well. So that's the brief opening, and what I'm going to do is turn it over to our team here, and hopefully the next hour and 45 minutes is spent with some good learning opportunities for the various components that we have in what we consider to be effective growth management.
Thank you, Tom, Madam Mayor, members of council. So I'll start my presentation. I've got a number of slides. The first one here, I want to spend a few minutes on. And I think everybody's familiar with this. This is just our official plan urban structure map, which really sets out the urban boundaries of our various communities. Obviously, the one thing that comes to mind when you look at this is the amount of green and brown, and that reflects the Greenbelt protected countryside, Oak Ridges Moraine area under those provincial plans, and approximately 75% of the town's land area is covered by protected countryside, either in the Greenbelt or the Oak Ridges Moraine, and those lands will be protected and won't be developed on. However, if you look at sort of, and the color doesn't show up great here, but the sort of our 3 or 4 communities, you've got Mount Albert, then the other 3 over sort of west of the 404, Sharon, Queensville, and Holland Landing. Those areas are, colored pink just to designate their urban areas. We've got council-approved secondary plans for each of those communities, and that's where the majority of the growth is going to occur. We've been seeing some of it over the last couple of years, but moving forward, that's where the majority of growth is going to occur. The region, They're in the midst of what they call a municipal comprehensive review that will lead up to their update to their regional official plan. They started a couple years ago. They had to put a pause to it because of some of the changes to the growth plan and the other provincial plans, but they are back at it. And leading up to that exercise, they need to bring their plan into conformity with the provincial growth plan and the other policies by the year 2023, and they'll be in a position to have an adopted regional plan by 2021, and hopefully the province will approve it by 2022. The local municipalities will then have to follow suit and do our update to our official plan. And the primary reason for the update, it's not necessarily a total rewrite of our official plan. We did that back in 2010 when we did our conformity exercise to the provincial plans, but it's really to deal with the expanded planning horizon out to the year 2041. Our current horizon is a 20-year horizon that took us from 2010 or 2011 to 2031. But with the growth plan and the additional growth projections, both population and employment, the region is working on land budgets, and they will be assigning a distribution of that projected growth to the various local municipalities. So we'll have to follow suit, and over the next couple of months I'll prepare a report for council's consideration on sort of our work plan for our official plan moving forward. I think this is a good opportunity for us to consider, and I'll spell that out in a future report. If you notice the white belt areas, what we call white belt, they're not environmental lands. There may be portions of environmental features there, but they are considered white belt under the provincial and the regional plan, and they are developable lands. They are not currently in our urban boundary, but I think this is an opportunity for us to have that discussion and consider in moving forward whether we want to add any of those white belts to our urban expansion moving forward. One of the reasons for that is, the region, as part of their update, is doing not only land use planning, they're doing infrastructure, capital servicing planning, financial planning, and we really want to deal with a comprehensive plan moving forward. So we set the stage for our future growth projection, growth forecast, as well as the future infrastructure planning that we'll need to service our ultimate population to 2041 and beyond. As the CAO mentioned earlier on in the previous slide, we do have an assignment of about 7,900 units worth of capacity. Beyond that, and beyond that sort of 50,000 persons projection, we need additional servicing infrastructure to handle that future growth. So, this is the time with the region's comprehensive review to take a look at sort of more comprehensive planning approach. But again, we'll have a discussion later on at a future date when I prepare a report on a work plan moving forward. So this one population figure here is just the rural area really entails about 6,000 persons spread throughout essentially the Greenbelt and the Oak Ridge Moraine area. Next number of slides really hone in on the various communities. So sharing community. As we know, the majority of the growth and development in the residential area has been going on for a number of years now, and it's just about complete on the east side of Morel Boulevard. A number of units in that chart, draft approved, that approved by council over the past few years, just over 2,000 units in total. The number of units that have been allocated to that group of developers in the development is about 1,546. What's left for them to complete, and it's essentially the west side of Morel, they require 520 units, and the majority of that, they're working with the region on a couple other options, but to achieve the maximum build out, we'll probably need the Upper York servicing system or an alternative to provide that additional capacity. Future estimated population, that is just a figure in our sharing community plan of ultimately about 10,000 persons within that sharing community proper upon build out. Again, those are forecasts. The next couple slides, and we do have a drone footage that our staff prepared back in November. This dates back to November 2018, and it just gives you a flavor of the amount of development that we've seen since 2016. So this is a view moving north up Morel, and as you can see on the west side, the homes are complete, and most of them obviously occupied. You can see the sod is down. People are putting up fences, so it's substantially complete on the east side of Morel moving forward. The balance of the 500 odd units really will happen on the west side of Morel. There are a number of sort of environmental features that won't be developed upon, but as we move further north, there are a number of parks and school sites. Just on your right, that's Our Lady of Good Counsel School. There is some development pockets on the west side, as you see, moving up to Mount Albert. So there's a school complete. And again, this just gives you good ideas to the amount of development that's occurred since 2015, 2016. Moving further north on the west side, that is the completed Morel Park. Again, maybe we can just we can speed it up, and this just takes us north to so there's Mount Albert, and you see some of the lands that are serviced and some model homes on the west side, and those are future phases that we'll see over the coming years. And this loops us around back to Morel. So we'll move forward. So the next slide is Queensville, and again, similar chart. Number of units draft approved to date by council in Queensville, just over approximately 1,100 units between the DG Group and the other two builders, Minto and Val Demera. Number of units of YDS allocation that has been reserved for this group up in Queensville is close to 3,000, so they have the majority. And the future estimated population for the Queensville community, again, this is upon complete build-out, is approximately 30,000 people. And the next slide is, again, a similar drone shot taken in November of 2016, obviously, before any development occurred. In 2018. I do want to add, with respect to Queensville, the other thing is obviously in Queensville, we've had about 650 permits that have been issued in total, and 624 of those have been occupied. And the other thing staff is working on, there are two plans, draft plans of subdivision within Queensville by the DG Group that have been appealed to the LPAT, the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal. Staff has been working with the developer over the past couple of weeks to bring those to a resolution, and we'll have a future report to council on those negotiations. Again, it's two plans, phases 4 and phase 5, and I'll just point those out once the drone shot is complete. And those plans will comprise about 600 additional units. And again, a mix of units, singles, and townhomes. If we can go back, if we can just stop there at that 2018, and I'll just show you where these two phases, phase 4 and 5, that are subject to the appeal at the tribunal that we're close to a resolution with the developer on. So we've got phase 4 is down in this location at the south end, and phase 5 is up here at the north end, just off the screenshot. So now we get to Holland Landing. We got next two slides, Holland Landing West and East. So Holland Landing West, again, total number of draft approved units, close to 1,300. Allocation, servicing allocation to the YDSS, close to 1,000. What's left to complete that Holland Landing West community, they require about 300 additional units worth of capacity. And I do have a number, in the number of permits that have been issued to date, about 560 in Holland Landing West, and 300 of those are occupied. And again, the secondary plan population projection for Holland Landing, including East and West, is approximately 20,000. The next slide is Holland Landing East. Again, the numbers there, 1,600 approved units, 900 allocation. And in Holland Landing East, we've had close to 200 permits issued and about 175 units that are currently occupied. Unfortunately, we don't have drone flyovers for Holland Landing due to the airports that's located just south, at the south end of Holland Landing, so we can send our drone up. So next is Mount Albert. Again, smaller community, estimated population is about 6,000, and we're close to that, build out. There are really only a couple parcels left that have some development potential, and Oxford Homes owns some property, I believe, here at the south end, and there's some development occurring at the north end and at the south end that Oxford Homes is completing. Those numbers aren't totally accurate. It's 47 units per with permits, 55 with occupancy. That 55 number really are already occupied, and those were attributed to a plan, Averton Homes. So the Oxford Homes numbers, we have 47 permits that have been issued and 35 have been occupied in Mount Albert. But again, we're close to build out in Mount Albert. There are some minor infill opportunities, and council will see a future report over the next month or two, a plan that was approved by the board, secondary plan approved. Averton Homes, Center Street North is a small infill development pocket of about 68 units with a mixed-use building, commercial at grade, and there's a site plan application that staff is finalizing and will be bringing forward to council over the next month or so for consideration. Again, also in Mount Albert, there are some employment and commercial lands and some opportunities there for non-residential growth. So moving forward, so this is, you're probably all familiar with this, the Green Lane Corridor secondary plan that council approved or adopted back in April of 2018, and it received approval by the York Region November of 2018. So this is a future secondary plan area. It covers an area of approximately 1,500 acres, and the projections there under the secondary plan, again, at full build out, 29,000 people and 4,400 jobs. And there's a range of, a broad range of and mix of uses, residential uses, some higher density uses as well, and some commercial employment opportunities. And Green Lane Corridor, I probably forgot to mention, has two of the, what we refer to as major local centers, one along the, around the Yonge and Green Lane quadrant, and the other one around the GO Station, Second Concession, and Green Lane quadrant. So that is something that, that's an area that is subject to, obviously, servicing allocation, but there's some great opportunities there for a mix of uses over time. The next steps for this council is, and for the development group, is to proceed with community design plans that will have to be prepared and will be considered by council. And it is really a form of another detailed planning exercise that deals with smaller parcels. Each individual landowner will come in with some detailed design and transportation network systems and just structure of how those pockets will develop prior to the actual development applications being submitted. Next, so this is a slide that really identifies some very conceptual development applications that we know we may be seeing shortly within the Green Lane area. Specifically, these shots are, again, very conceptual, but they're located at that northwest quadrant of Green Lane and Second. And so we've had some discussions, and we know that developer group wants to proceed with, of course, there's some mid-rise, high-rise residential opportunities that are allowed under the official plan, but again, subject to servicing. But they do want to proceed with some of the office development and retail development. This at the upper left-hand corner is a supermarket, and this is an office building. So we may see some of those retail and office development proposals in the near future. And again, it's a great opportunity to see some of that, some of those employment opportunities in this area. Again, I think I mentioned there's a mix of high-density development and a broad range of retail and office developments proposed for the entire Green Lane corridor. So this next map really just identifies our official plan, future employment area that's focused around the 404 corridor between 404 and Woodbine Avenue, and again north of Davis Drive. To the south here is obviously the existing, Green Lane, the existing Harry Walker extension. That's an existing employment area. So this area shaded in blue is designated as a future employment area. We are required to proceed with and it's one of our capital projects, to proceed with terms of reference and an RFP to initiate that detailed secondary plan process for that employment area. Next slide. Again, these next slides really just show some of the land use designations within our community plan areas. So this is Sharon. We have the village core area, which permits a mix of uses as well, with heights of up to 4 stories along that Leslie Street corridor, with specific design policies to ensure that any new development is complementary and compatible with the existing character from a historical and architectural standpoint of the village, of existing development within Sharon, specifically up and down the Leslie Street frontage, because we do have a number of older properties and buildings there. So this is, again, a similar map, just identifying the Queensville sort of land use designations. Obviously in Queensville, we talked about the residential. This central component here is sort of what's known as the Queensville Center area, again, identified for mixed uses, but also a good percentage of those lands identified in the OP, up to 10%, will be open space and walkway connection type uses. The blue are the employment designations, again, along the 404 corridor. So there's some, moving forward, some great opportunities for prestige employment uses in this corridor. Again, the prestige employment uses specifically speaks to sort of the higher order type employment uses, office, research development type facilities, hotels, institutional type uses as well. Next slide, Holland Landing. Again, here, apart from the residential areas, there are some employment designations, general employment, prestige employment, and along the village core there, similar type land use designations that speak to some mixed uses along that core area. In this one, Mount Albert, again, similarly, Mount Albert does have a significant portion of lands designated for employment, commercial corridor. Again, this is the Center Street. This is the site for the site. We have a site plan for this development area, east side of Center Street, the Averton Homes, their final phase of about 68 townhomes and a mixed-use 2-story building, retail at grade, residential units above. So that'll be a future report to council on that site plan application. This last land use designation really just identifies that whole Bales Drive employment area. And we do have some pockets. This is the area down here. And there are other pockets of existing employment area identified in our official plan that exist out in the rural areas. And there are some opportunities there as well for employment. There's some existing employment uses there already. Next slide. I mean, this is, I think, a couple of these slides I'm excited about, and I know the other GMs as well have been working with, CAO and GM of corporate services. We've got some very key employment opportunities that will be coming into to town. Some of them already exist. We have actual applications. This one on the left is what is known as the Kelson proposal. It's a 15-acre piece of property on the northeast corner of Woodbine and Davis. It's vacant. Kelson has lands that are developed currently for employment uses further to the east. So we have an application here, 15 acres, total potential upon build out of 500 plus jobs. And it's a combination of some retail uses, office, and multi-unit industrial buildings, a total of 200,000 square feet worth of employment uses, and the owner is prepared to proceed with the first phase, which is a combination of retail and industrial condominium units. And upon total build out, I mean, this will generate not only, you know, as I mentioned, 500 plus jobs, but in total, you know, add to our, you know, our tax base, non-residential, but this entire development could generate $1 million plus of development charges that'll come to the town of East Gwillimbury, $4 or $5 million in total to the region as well. So that's an exciting opportunity here, and the owner is anxious to proceed. So again, council will see a future site plan on this in the near future. On the right side, everybody knows about Vince's. They're undergoing a 20,000 square foot addition to their building, and they're hoping to be complete by the end of 2018. A great addition to the village of Sharon. Next slide. These are a couple other employment opportunities. I think council's familiar with both of these. The one on the left is known as the Wycliffe last phase of their subdivision, northwest corner of Leslie and Mount Albert. They've got some townhomes left in this phase, but their first critical phase, they want to proceed with this seniors housing complex. It's approximately 200 suites, and again, it's a mix of, it's the Rivera Care is the operator. It's a mix of independent living, assisted living, long-term memory care as well. So council's already seen an official plan for this area and a draft plan of subdivision. They have just completed the land assembly to add a piece of property here to complete the development, and so they will be coming in with modifications to their OP, really housekeeping measure, and their zoning bylaw to implement the zoning for the senior housing shortly. On the right side, this is the kitty corner. This is a southwest quadrant of Leslie and Mount Albert. So this is what we call the Shops of Sharon. We have a site plan application in. There was a community meeting held by the community information meeting held by the applicant last week. And again, this is a proposal for a 10-acre redevelopment of this site. It's currently vacant. A mix of retail uses. As a Shoppers Drug Mart, they tell us they're committed to coming here, and some other retail uses. This is a future phase along Mount Albert, a mixed-use retail at grade, residential apartments above. But again, their first phase, which will be subject to a severance to sever this off, will be for another retail housing, seniors housing component, and staff will be working with, in response to comments we heard from the residents, to address some of those concerns about access, design of the site, traffic, et cetera, moving forward. And this will be subject of site plan applications that will require council's approval for any development to proceed, notwithstanding they are proceeding with a severance just to create that separate block to allow development phasing, because it is such a large site. These are some other employment opportunities. This area is the Young Green Lane, the Fieldgate Plaza, where the Lowe's is. They're in their last phases. So, you know, Longo's will be open this summer. That's a 50,000 square foot expansion. Beer store is just about complete. There's another multi-unit or retail unit beside it. And again, between the Longo's and the beer store, there's about 70,000 square feet of additional space. Could generate up towards 300 jobs. On this site as well, not sure if we've got a slide, no, but what we're missing on this slide is the last phase, which is the addition of the Shoppers Drug Mart and multi-unit commercial building just in front of Longo's. That is the last phase for this development. And there will be a site plan to council on that Shoppers Drug Mart. Again, that is another 25,000 square foot addition, and they're final phase to complete this plaza, which has been under construction for 10 years. And again, that also generates not only jobs, but additional, tax base and development charges. I guess coming into one of the second last slides, this is another employment opportunity that, I think we should all be excited about. It is this is the existing building on the east side of Leslie Street, just south of us, just north of the service station on the east side of Leslie Street. It's an old listed property, and we have an applicant who has a plan to proceed with the repurposing of this building into a proposed daycare to serve ultimately about 150 students and employ upwards of 25 full-time staff. It's a great opportunity to repurpose an existing structure and add a use that is needed, and this is a very compatible use in this location. Again, this is subject to a site plan application for council's consideration, probably in Q2 or Q3 of this year. And I think I mentioned it's a 10,000 square foot addition as well, and a refurbishing of the existing building, but they will be maintaining the existing listed heritage structure. So it's a great repurpose of the building and a needed use for the community of Sharon. And this operator currently operates 2 other very successful daycare operations in York Region. Last slide is just an update to town's heritage list. I know this is one of my goals, is to move forward with the update of our list that was approved by council back in 2011. We have close to 470 properties on the list, of which only 11 are designated under Part 4. So we have a capital budget project identified to retain a consultant to help us to assist us in the review of the heritage list, identifying criteria to review and try and streamline that list, as well as opportunities to determine whether there are properties on this list that warrant designation to individual designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So I'll be preparing a report for an RFP again, hopefully in Q2 of this year. The other thing as well is there was direction from councils in the past, and I identified in our official plan to consider heritage conservation districts, and we've identified in our official plan the potential for exploring the opportunity for districts in of all our communities, Holland Landing, Sharon, Mount Albert, and Queensville. So that's something that we will address as we move forward with that report and that review of our heritage list. That concludes my presentation. I know there was a lot there, but if there are any questions. The other thing I forgot to mention I have, and I will hand out later on, I've prepared what I refer to as an overview of the planning and development approvals process for council. It may be worthwhile. I mean, some members of council are very familiar with the process, but planners use a lot of jargon, so this just tries to simplify some of the definitions, what official plans are, the hierarchy of planning in the province between the provincial plans, the regional plans, our own documents, OPs, zoning bylaws, site plans, and I've included some flow charts just to help navigate through the development approvals process. So I'll hand that out afterwards if there are any questions.
Are there questions? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So to go back to some of the servicing issues and the allocation numbers that are here, I know in the past we've identified, it doesn't really matter which slide you use, there's about 2,000, just over 2,000, almost 2,100 units that are approved or draft plan approved but don't have allocation. The 900 units that were in additional allocation that were given to us over this, I believe it was late last year, are those included in those numbers, or are we going to have to consider how to treat those additional units? So in a sense, we've got 7,900 units to deal with, but the allocation numbers don't necessarily match that. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor. That's correct. It's a good point. I forgot to mention it. So, yeah, the original 7,000 commitment was addressed through sort of previous agreements to the developers group. It may not be the slide, but we've added, the figure is 7,900. So that includes the 900 additional units worth of allocation that the region assigned to East Gwillimbury just this past fall in 2018. So this will require, now again, just to be clear, they assigned additional capacity to municipalities of Newmarket, Aurora, and East Gwillimbury. We got additional 900 units. Of that, that's 9 units equivalent. It translates into about 2,700 persons. The majority of that can only be used once some additional infrastructure, additional pumping stations are completed in Aurora and Newmarket, and they're scheduled for completion in 2021, 2022. What we can use immediately of that 900 is approximately 100 units worth. So, and I know our last time I think we updated council on our servicing allocation policy was in 2015 or 2016. So that'll be another report that I'll need to prepare for council's consideration on this additional assignment. So based on my calculation, aside from the additional, 3,000 units capacity that is unused, that is available for some of the landowners group, we do have a couple hundred units worth in the town's reserve that council could allocate to whomever moving forward. In addition to that, the balance of the 900, which we could use 2021 moving forward.
So to clarify, so if we were to look at the Sharon slide, we have 2,066 units draft approved. We have YDSS allocation of 1,546, and 520 units are requiring UISS allocation. But in theory, it may not necessarily be 520, it may be 250 or whatever, however council decides to deal with that additional 900 unit allocation and whatever is left in our reserve.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct. In addition, though, the developers group are working with the region through flow monitoring, and they may be able to, we may be able to allocate perhaps not all, perhaps even the entire 500 within the current system.
So they're looking for their bonusing?
Yes. It's a combination of that as well, yes.
Councillor Persichini.
Yes, to you, Madam Mayor. With all this developing and all this housing and people, is every thought with the region thinking about putting 4 lanes on Leslie or all around the town so we can divert? I mean, it's inevitable that we're going to, the growth is going to happen. But we also got to consider the traffic of people get frustrated and with not having only 1 lane. The region, hoping that they have plans in the next 3 to 5 years, or that they will have like the green lane, 4 lanes. We obviously need to look for the future. We're planning everything else, but we don't think about the traffic. Traffic is a big deal everywhere. So that's something that I would like to have an answer on. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, and Jim Molinari may be able to jump in here. I haven't got my head around some of the other sort of road capital projects, but that's something that Region's looking at as part of their OP update as well. Their master planning for transportation and water and wastewater, whether there are improvements for Leslie Street or not. I don't have that detail, but with any development applications that come forward, that's something that we in the region looks at, whether they need some widenings or turning lanes, et cetera.
Thank you.
Mr. Webster.
I'm not the town engineer for roads, but I will take a stab at this one. Been around here for a little bit, and the biggest issue we have, Councillor Persichini, from my seat, is inter-regional traffic. AM and PM peak, Monday to Friday, and attraction to our Green Lane and Yonge retail center, which clogs our roads. And this term of council, we've had direction to prioritize the Highway 404, 400 linkage. And I can advise council that there's continues to be meetings with Mayor Keffer and CAO McKnight As a matter of fact, just yesterday, C.A.L. McKnight contacted our offices, Madam Mayor, requesting another meeting and proposing a letter go to this government to again urging prioritization of that. So that would be a very effective way to remove traffic from our community, and maybe not needing for us to expand our roadways and the region to expand our roadways for benefit of other regional communities. And so that's point one. And secondly, the point that Mr. Ramuno has made with regard to the Whitebelt lands, and you're going to start seeing it soon with regards to our development charges bylaw. And by having our 3 communities started, and by the 3 communities, I certainly don't want to forget Mount Albert, but our 3 in the urban area being Sharon, Holland Landing, and Queensville. Infrastructure in the white area, the White Belt lands, is a key driver of our new DC, and you're going to be hearing from that soon. And with those lands not being designated for development and not being allowed to have phased managed growth by the town, to have roads built through those areas is a key driver at this point in time. And what it would mean is a linkage that at this point in time, Morel Boulevard stops at Mount Albert. It forces everyone to either go up the 2nd concession or Leslie Street, and then to get back onto John Candy Boulevard. And in the fullness of time, there would be better movement of traffic if we had a mid-block collector, it would be called, which would connect the 2. And I point to the Thompson Road extension too. So there's going to be more to follow on building roads and the need for transportation capacity that our team will be bringing forward through our development charges and our master plan updates. So it's a multi-department thing, which is why I'm speaking to it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Crothers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have so many questions, but I would love to take the opportunity to sit down with you and go into more detail on some of these. It looks like a very well thought out plan. The questions I want to ask today are around that unallocated capacity. So my understanding is that the builders who contributed to the infrastructure have been promised the 7,000 units, and now we have another 900 that we would be able to allocate. Would we be able to start to take those lagoons offline with that 900? Would that be a possibility for us if council wanted?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The lagoon capacity has, there's capacity that is already reserved in the YDSS for the lagoon flows. The lagoons themselves are going to be, the ECA will be transferred to the Upper York when that facility is in place. So those are the 2 kind of triggers that are in place that will allow for the transitioning of the lagoons and the capacity within lagoons.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on that. So if the allocation was allocated to YDSS, why can we not put it towards that?
Through Madam Mayor, the lagoon capacity, the extra 900 units, council can choose however it wishes to decide to allocate those units. My point was simply that the YDSS currently has capacity within it for the lagoons. In the event that the Upper York doesn't come into play, those flows have been reserved within the YDSS for the lagoon capacity.
Then why are we not decommissioning the lagoons if the capacity is there?
Mr. Webster, go ahead.
Let me try this one, Madam Mayor, and certainly General Manager Molinari has spoke well to this, but essentially, if I could go to another community, Stouffville. Stouffville had a dilapidated sewage treatment plant that was failing. And the mayor at the time was Mayor Emerson, and his council's requirement was when the municipal servicing was provided to the Stouffville community, the priority was to decommission the failing sewage plant. And the folks at the region at the time, of which I was one, we made sure that happened. And so when the first homes were built under the new York-Durham sewage system in Stouffville, many, many years ago, the old plant was decommissioned. So East Gwillimbury Council has gone on record many, many times, and I think it dates back to 2005 and prior, that when the first units of the York-Durham sewage system came to East Gwillimbury, that the lagoons were to be decommissioned. And what happened in the interim is at a provincial directive to look at the Upper York sewage solution. It has tied the decommissioning of the lagoons to the opening of the Upper York sewage system. And so this council and Mayor Haxon, being our regional representative, has asked many, many times to have the lagoons decommissioned as a priority. And the region, who has carriage of the Upper York sewage system and the delivery of it, says that the provincial government will not allow the lagoons to be decommissioned until the Upper York is approved and the certificate that Mr. is transferred. It's a very complicated thing. So essentially, the very entity that we're asking the province to allow for the decommissioning of the lagoons will not approve the infrastructure that would allow that to happen. It's a chicken and egg story of very large concern. One thing I can tell you from attendance at a CAMA facility, a council member from Erin arose and said that they're the largest community in Ontario that still has open sewage lagoons. And we're right up there with Erin as one of the largest communities in Ontario that has open sewage lagoons treating our sewage in Holland Landing.
Thank you very much. So there's capacity in the York-Durham pipe, but we're tied up on chicken and egg with a certificate that's held by the provincial government. So we need to be putting pressure on the provincial government to get those closed. Okay. I do think that those are a real stain on our town, that with so many great things happening, and to still have those, and people don't understand, and it does seem rather silly when it's paperwork, when the capacity's there, but there's paperwork that's holding it up. Anyways, we'll leave that. I just have one more question, if I could, Madam Mayor, about the village chorus. I just wanted to say that I like that idea that we are preserving our village cores, and I'm wondering if you can share with us, obviously not now, but the design policies that you talked about for that, so we can get an idea of what is allowed in the village cores and what is not. I think preserving our village cores with all this growth coming in is going to be really important. Thank you very much.
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to try and take a stab at the servicing piece of it, but with respect to lobbying the province, this council has also done that, and we got a letter back that clearly didn't seem to understand what we were asking for, which was basically to say, look, we realize that it's really just a piece of paper that you've put on a shelf that says you need to transfer it from one facility to the other. Can you not just hold it in abeyance while we take this antiquated piece of infrastructure offline? And we were told no, essentially. We got a bureaucratic answer. So we have tried, and we can keep trying. I think that's the message. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Crone.
Great presentation so far, through you, Madam Mayor. I have two questions. One is really excited to see the future possibilities for Green Lane and by the second concession with what looked like some major office buildings, shopping, possibly condominium units. Being that the GO station is so critical, I wonder what sort of options are open to us, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I'll ask anyways because I can. What would we do to make traversing from one side of the road to the other for folks to get to and from the GO station? I know tunnels are expensive, and I know bridges aren't cheap either. I worry about some of the accidents that we've had on Green Lane with folks. I'd hate to see it as a major crosswalk. So I'm just curious. I think I love what I'm seeing, but I have safety concerns for that intersection. So I would welcome comments from staff.
To you, Madam Mayor. I mean, I haven't looked into it, but I've attended a number of meetings with Metrolinx in their work as part of their improvements, so 50-minute all-day service up to Aurora. But I still have some contacts, and I will have some discussions with them with respect to our GO station at Second Concession.
And so I guess my next question is, Madam Mayor, through you, Mr. Webster, you threw out a couple of stats on the Upper York that kind of jumped out at me. We've spent $30 million, and when I say we, I mean taxpayers have spent $30 million on an environmental assessment on the Upper York system, and the other number that you threw out to me was $100 million has been spent in total. Could you, to me, I'm just a simple guy, but that sounds like a ton of money that we're throwing around here, and we still don't have anything to show for it of consequence. Could you throw a little more meat on the bone around that for me?
Molinari to speak to it. And those were approximates, but it's in those ranges for sure.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, a significant amount of funds has been expended on that project, and as per CAO Webster, about $30 million on the EA. There's also a fairly significant component for land acquisition, detailed design, and just keeping that project moving forward.
So I'll throw one more in. So what, in your estimation, what are the benchmarks, the hurdles that we have to cross to get this thing going?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the real crunch right now is really getting the EA formally approved. The EA is on the minister's desk, awaiting his approval. Once that is done, that kind of opens up, provides the necessary approvals in order to proceed with the works. Until that happens, the Upper York really isn't a formal project. The region is advancing it under the understanding that they expect that it will be approved in short order, but they've been expecting that approval for several years now. So they're moving forward at a rate so as not to further delay the ultimate timing and still keep that project on track.
Mr. Webster.
In the interest of full transparency, there are a couple steps. And so while we get fixated on the EA approval, it certainly would be a large step one. The second thing is actually to build and fund the remainder of it, which I believe the current estimates are approximately 600 to 700 million. And so 100 million is just a step along the way. And York Region, I think it's public record that their financial situation at this point in time is somewhat under a little bit of strain. Let's put it that way. And so we talk about good comprehensive planning, and there's often been things where pipes shouldn't lead planning, and rather you should have good land decisions made through official plans which designate lands, which allow for good growth management practices. And that's why the White Belt lands in this next municipal comprehensive review are so important, because essentially the lion's share of funding that would be required for the Upper York build lies in the undesignated settlement lands, which we call the White Belt lands in East Gwillimbury. So again, there's some very big decision points that will be in front of this term of council as part of our ongoing growth management exercise.
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not to change the subject, but I did want to go back to Councillor Crone's initial inquiry when he was referencing what was happening along Green Lane and talking about pedestrian safety and overpasses and so on. This point was made probably about 8 years ago by then Councillor Eaton, and that was, it's not just the pedestrians that need to cross, but that we really need to start talking about the at-grade crossing with Metrolinx and the fact that we've got the trains that are traversing, and the more trains that we bring through, the more it affects the traffic flow along Green Lane as well. So I think it's not just trying to get the pedestrians over to the GO station and back and forth, but it's also trying to ensure that we have a flyover or an underpass or something that is done to address the at-grade crossing there. Thank you.
I just had a couple just before you leave, and it may be one that we would take offline or share at a future council meeting. With the changes of housing over the years, it was always large lots, smaller bungalows, then it became larger houses. We have a lot more townhouses that we see in all of the plans now. Do you see a lot of higher density coming for housing in East Gwillimbury? And I'm thinking about multi-res, of course, and the condominium and apartment market that seems to be further south that is picked up as the community has matured. Do you see that as part of our long-term, I'm going to call them advantages and then challenges?
Certainly, to you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I think it's something that we've already planned for or identified for in our official plan, especially through the Green Lane secondary plan. We've got a number of areas, especially around Yonge and Green Lane, second concession, in Green Lane that I identified as high density mixed use, where we're trying to encourage high density. And some of the heights go up to 20 stories in those intersections, subject to design criteria. So we're going to see our share as well. But I mean, we need a balance, right? I mean, and one thing a municipality can do towards trying to achieve affordable housing, and that's always a difficult one in times like this when prices skyrocket, is to provide that mix of housing and also tenure, right? Purpose-built rentals, but providing that mix of multi-story, mid-rise and what we may call high-rise buildings. But we'll still see a mix of housing types as well: the singles, the towns, different forms of towns, the stacked. But we're definitely we have planned for apartment buildings in the Green Lane corridor, and in some of our other communities, we have some higher density designations, mixed-use designations that will allow, again, subject to proper design, even up to 7, 8 stories as well.
I did the quick math, and with the Green Lane as well as the Sharon Queensville Holland Landing East and West and Mount Albert, it looks like it's about 95 or 100,000 people. And I'm wondering if then we add on to higher density. We're all at this point short of being able to service. How do you see that moving forward?
To you, Madam Mayor, it's a good point. And as the CEO mentioned, I mean, this is the opportunity to deal with that comprehensive planning, right? Identify the additional lands that we may want to bring into the urban area long term, and we're talking up to 2041. And so the region can do, and we can do, sort of the master planning for the infrastructure piece as well, and financial planning. Again, and I think there is room to, to go beyond that figure of 90,000 if we add additional white belt lands. And I'll provide that land budget number for council moving forward, but it's something that we need to plug into the region at this point. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is it typically takes, 10 plus years to bring lands into the urban area and get through sort of the municipal planning approvals process, at the regional level and at our level. So, I mean, even if we were to consider sort of additional expansions to the urban area and bring in some white belt lands through this current MCR process at the regional level, they wouldn't come on stream in 2 or 3 years. It'd be 10 years plus. Notwithstanding, even putting aside sort of the servicing question, it's just dealing with the various planning approvals, going through the OP update at the regional level, at our level, and then the secondary plan design work as well. And then as part of that, we would incorporate phasing and staging plans to ensure that some of our existing communities, the Sharons and Queenvilles, Hall Landings, are sort of substantially complete or to a point before we start opening up some of these other lands. But again, it could take 10+ years to get these lands into the urban area and through the development approvals process.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Very well done. Okay, we have more. Mr. Velchik?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a nice picture of Carolyn Saxton up there with the award-winning dashboard. It is one of the projects that really exemplifies, I think, our commitment to creativity and innovation at the town. It's become, aside from it being recognized, the most important feature is that it's enabled us to really enhance our management and planning for growth. And so as a tool, it's helped us collectively throughout the administration, and in terms of our information that we provide to council for decision making, to do that in the most effective way. So something that really has helped us in planning and conducting our business. In terms of priorities, and Mr. Ramuno talked quite at length during his presentation about applications and the opportunities for businesses and job creation, I'm very excited about that prospect. We've had, as the CAO indicated earlier today, a significant amount, about a third or a little more than a third of our current residential growth through the YDSS. And really the time is ripe now to enhance the non-residential side of growth as well. And although that does involve in sort of larger, longer-term time frame, the servicing of additional employment lands, which is going to be critical to us, there also is all sorts of opportunities in the meantime for job creation and for growth. And the Business First program is really a culture or a mindset around prioritizing business applications that do result in jobs and non-residential taxes. And I wanted to remind Council, though you've heard this before, one of the things that has happened during the latter part of 2018 is we've undertaken a fairly significant review of what that looks like. One of the things that we hear from applicants is although it is nice to have a variety of incentives for attraction, likely the biggest incentive for attraction is an efficient process for processing applications and expediting the setup of their business. Quite frankly, if you can promise that, that is all the incentive in the world that they're looking for, because they don't get it very often. Sometimes people refer to it as cutting the red tape, and that's what we're trying to do. And I wanted to give an example of where I think we've done that very well and should be a model for what Business First should look like in East Gwillimbury. So when the financial institution in Mount Albert decided that they were going to close their facility, it was going to leave a pretty big void in an important part of East Gwillimbury. And I refer to the bank as almost like an anchor tenant in that downtown core. And so that was a pretty key concern for the community, for this council, and for the administration. So we worked very hard as an administration and with council as well to facilitate discussions between the outgoing banking institution and the Duca Credit Union to facilitate a replacement facility to make sure that not only the void was filled in Mount Albert, but I think this is an example of where there was also a little bit of alignment of stars. We had timing-wise, we had an opportunity because there was some downtown revitalization grants available through the province. Not significant, I might add, in terms of large-scale dollars. It was just over $50,000. But what we were able to do is leverage those dollars, and in partnership with the credit union, with the Mount Albert Village Association, with local businesses, very much engagement of all of our departments internally and council, and using the provincial funding, we were able to not only see that new financial institution establish itself there, but to make some really overdue upgrades and changes to some of the infrastructure on the street, and to really bring a little more appeal to that downtown core, including the town's parking lot down the road. So a lot more street appeal, a lot more attraction to make sure that residents see that as a destination. And so we had tremendous feedback. In fact, the Village Association chair had certainly shared with me when I was out there that she'd seen more happen in a 6-week time frame than she'd seen in 10 years of advocating for change there. And I think she was rather shocked that sort of a local government could act that quickly. But we really can when we put our mind to it and when there's a collective commitment. And we had that. So very, very good example of what business first should mean, and more importantly, what the experience should be of businesses coming into town. I can tell you that the Duca folks have been incredibly complimentary of what they felt was a real nice experience they had, really feeling welcomed and supported and encouraged to come and do business in the town. So I thought it was important to talk about that. Just a little bit that you might be interested in terms of, Mr. Ramuno was talking about some of the sites that are currently partially developed and continue to be developed. The one that's on the screen right now is at Yonge and Green Lane. And just interesting to note that to date we've got about 35 businesses in that area with over 1,200 jobs. And when I look at some of our, and when we get through our non-res development dashboard, I'm hoping to have some information that I can share administratively and with council to give you an idea of the significance of what some of these employers bring to the community. So if you look at some of the larger retail outlets that we have in the Yonge and Green Lane area, you've got some that are employing alone in excess of 300 jobs. And in some cases, that's about half of those are full-time jobs and half are part-time and seasonal jobs. And then you've got taxes. You could have one large retailer, paying upwards of $80,000 to $100,000 in taxes to the town as well. So jobs and non-res taxes. And then you can see the impact on growth-related funding through development charges in that site alone, and it's not complete, so there's more to come. $3 million in development charges and almost $125,000 in development application fees. And if you remember, when we went through the budget process, we have one segment of our budget referred to as our development and fee supported budget, and those fees are really what pay for all of the plans review, the inspections, the infrastructure oversight that's done by our staff and so on. So those are our critical fees that are used to fund our management of those operations, and so they're not funded on the backs of taxes. And you can see the impact on taxes alone just with that one site, almost $300,000 in annual taxes. So that's upwards of 1.5% on our tax levy from one spot. And from a public engagement point of view, this is a good example of where this site in particular has been the home for the farmers market for a number of years. And so you start to see real community engagement opportunities at some of these sites as well, because they're far more than just, a retail shopping experience. So at this point, I'm going to ask the manager of development finance just to come up and talk to you a little bit about development charges and a little bit of background on that. You're going to hear a lot more about this as we come forward with our update to the development charge bylaw, but just a little bit about what they are and where we are with the process that's underway as we speak.
Nope. I think this is my first time at this podium. Sorry about that. Development charges are important revenue tools for municipalities in Ontario and across Canada. They're fees that are charged to new development to pay for the growth-related capital and infrastructure servicing costs. Municipalities have limited tools for collecting money: the property tax, user fees, grants, and development charges, which is why they're so important to growing communities like East Gwillimbury. The intent of development charges is based on the principle that growth should pay for growth, and that the financial burden of servicing new development shouldn't be borne by existing taxpayers. DCs fund the capital cost of servicing new development at the same level as the existing community, and they cannot be used to fund operating costs, local services, asset management provisions, or service level increases. The process of calculating and administering development charges is prescribed by provincial legislation. The Development Charges Act identifies those costs that can be included in the DCs. So these are things like buildings, the acquisition of land, growth-related studies, as well as borrowing or financing costs for capital projects that are growth-related. The Act also specifies those items that cannot be included in development charge calculations. Here in East Gwillimbury, we are unique in that we levy a community capital contribution charge on developers to pay for those ineligible aspects. So to a greater extent, growth really is paying for growth here in EG. Our CAO touched on this a little bit, but as our community continues to grow, we are experiencing cost pressures associated with connecting our new communities and completing our town-wide infrastructure networks. We still have work to do, but we continue to collaborate with the local development industry to ensure that our servicing infrastructure is in place in a fiscally responsible and sustainable way. On that note, we are currently undertaking an update to our development charge background study and bylaw, which means we're calculating new rates. The town's current bylaw will expire in June of this year, so we plan to bring forward a bylaw for council's consideration in May. We've been working with the development industry as part of our working group over the last several months on the update, and we're currently right now drafting our background study, which we intend to publish at the beginning of next month. We'll then have our formal public meeting in April, which hopefully will be followed by a passing of a bylaw that has the support not only of council, but also our local development industry and stakeholders.
I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity just to talk very briefly about one of the key aspects in terms of preparing for and managing growth is the type of team that you build. And I just want to acknowledge Carolyn Brown, who was just speaking to you, our Manager of Development Finance, because one of the things that we recognize strategically before growth really started in 15, 16, prior to that, was that we needed to make sure we had staff in place that really represented, I guess, that fulfilled the mantra of they've been where we're going. And Carolyn is a good example of where we used to essentially contract out and get consultants to assist us with this type of DC review exercise and growth planning exercise we're doing with our development charge bylaw. We were able to get Carolyn, who's had extensive experience essentially across Canada putting these sorts of things together, and bring her in-house. And so now we've got that service not only in-house while we're going through the process of doing our DC review, but equally, if not more importantly, as we manage that process through the life of that DC, we've got the expertise in here to help us in sensitivity analysis, future planning, and any adjustments we need to make. So that's been really a big part of the strategy of how we've planned for and continue to manage the growth that we're experiencing and will continue to experience. One of the things that Carolyn talked about was growth paying for growth, and I just want to reiterate that a little bit on this slide. As you can see, we've got on the left side of the slide two general categories, capital and operating. And really, what that means is acquiring it or building it would be the capital, and then operating it would be running it, as well as potentially maintaining and renewing and replacing as it needed to, as it aged and it became through its useful life. And so when you look at the top half of the slide, you can see that there's a number of funding sources for the growth-related capital side. So for acquiring or building the assets that are needed to support growth, we fund that largely through development charges. But in a lot of municipalities, you would see some portion of tax funding for ineligible costs, for portions that are not able to be funded through development charges. But in EG, we're very fortunate that we've got a very robust funding plan and agreements in place with our development community. The community capital contributions are key to that. We also may, from time to time, use reserves. We're always looking for grants. That's something that we welcome, partnerships and grant opportunities. And I also just wanted to highlight the fact that the town has been in the very, very solid financial position for a number of years now, being debt-free. And but as we continue to grow, there may very well be appropriate and necessary circumstances to look at construction financing for some of our growth-related facilities, particularly where we've got timing issues between when you want those facilities to be built and when that ultimate growth-related development charge and community capital contribution charges would be collected. I do want to point out that once you start to operate these growth-related facilities, then they're typically operated with tax-based funding or a combination of tax and fees of some form. That those could be program fees and that sort of thing. And so the timing of when you choose to actually construct growth-related facilities is incredibly important, because you need to be able to make sure that not only can you afford to build it, but that you can afford within reason to operate it. And so timing is really critical. So you'll often note that we won't necessarily speak to a particular year of projected construction, but we might look at things like population levels or something like that that would constitute a reasonable time at which we believe that those facilities would be sustainable from an operating point of view. And just, I guess, a final point, just to reiterate the importance of the suite of non-tax revenues, and just to remind council and those that we're streaming to that we will be undertaking in 2019 a comprehensive fee review. We're not only looking at our development charges, but any of those other types of fees that we have, both on the program side as well as the development fee side. We have 5 major components on the development fee side that support those operations. And then we're always looking for, as I said earlier, grants, provincial, federal, other sorts of grants, and any opportunities for private, public partnership. And on a smaller scale, the example I gave you earlier about the investment in the downtown of Mount Albert was an example of where there was some provincial money, certainly some money from the business that was setting up, as well as some resources committed by our departments in terms of how we could work to enhance that downtown. And so it was a really good example of I think what a partnership can do and how you can leverage even fairly what might otherwise seem to be smaller amounts of money to have very significant local impact. So that's all I have for now. We do have a piece coming up a little later in the presentation on customer service and public engagement, but unless there's any other questions, I would...
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just quickly, I know that we kind of hit it out of the park when it came to implementing some business first principles with the credit union in Mount Albert. I might suggest that with other applications, we may not have been as successful. Our staff actively looking at that process and workflow and identifying ways that we can streamline it so that we can continue to deliver really excellent service to our business community when they come in for these sorts of applications. How do we replicate that repeatedly? I mean, I think this was it stood out for me, and I want to make sure that other applicants are giving the same level of service.
Madam Mayor, through you, thank you for the question. Absolutely. We are looking to use that as essentially a template for what the experience should look like for any businesses that come into town. And really the success lies in in my mind, a cultural mindset amongst our senior administration team, our council, and our extended management team to say that when business applications come in the door and there's potential for job creation and non-residential taxes that come along with that, that becomes a priority. And it means that it doesn't mean that we drop everything else and that we don't deal with other things, but it means that those applications that come in that have the potential for job creation get prioritized. And they're not just prioritized by one department. It doesn't work to have what I might refer to as an economic development department that's swimming upstream and simply pushing all the time to try and move things along. It's got to be a shared commitment that can be facilitated and supported actively through economic development, but it is very much a team effort, and the team then shares in the success of the results. And so that's the mindset that I think has emerged and is that we're focusing on moving forward.
Thank you very much. Our next is Community Parks, Recreation, and Culture.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, for the opportunity to present the Growth Management Workshop for Community Parks, Rec, and Culture. This is an exciting time for Parks, Rec, and Culture, and like to present today a number of exciting projects as well as initiatives, some that have been completed and then some that are in the progress. This presentation today will very much focus on Parks and Recreation infrastructure. However, I'd like to highlight the significant work that's been done and a focus with our recreation branch and our events. I'd like to invite council out and the public to our Family Fun Day, which is occurring this coming Family Day, Holiday Monday. And at that event, we'll have the release of our Health and Active Living Guide. We'll have a 3-on-3 pond hockey tournament, which I'm informed is now sold out. As well, we have our Health and Active Living Fair, which is a collection of approximately over 20 sports and community groups under one roof, through one door, where our residents can access information, register for programs, register with sporting groups, and get out and active in this cold winter weather. So moving forward, Parks and Recreation Services very much build complete communities. They build quality of life. No offense to my counterparts in roads, water, and sewer, but people move to and stay in communities because of the parks, the trails, the programs, the special events, the sense of place, and getting together and meeting their friends and neighbors. In 2018, CPRC opened 8 parks, an unprecedented number of parks, and 3 large trail connections in each of our communities. So I'll highlight some of the projects in each of our communities here. 2 parks in Holland Landing and 2 trails connections as well in Holland Landing. In Sharon West, we had a park opening tour where we opened three parks and one large-scale trail connection, and that is just an example of some of the parks that were opened in the Sharon West community. Queensville, two parks, one park redevelopment and one new park, and as well I'm pleased to report that we are now approaching substantial completion on Valley View Park, which is in the My Queensville community. The rendering is listed here. One of the first parks where we'll have a large-scale, almost two-story web climber, as well as, believe it or not, a zip line in a local community park. So we're excited about that project. That's set to come online for early spring 2019. In Mount Albert, Manor Forest Park was officially opened. The trail will be developed into 2019. And then we also worked with corporate services and CIES to implement the downtown streetscape, Mount Albert downtown revitalization works in coordination with the opening of the Duca Credit Union. Some of the parks projects that we have scheduled for 2019 and early 2020 is in each of the community. We have 12 different projects that we're presently working on. 3 of those projects are large-scale park redevelopment projects, and the remaining projects are new development projects that we'll see in each of the communities. There's some pictures on the band on the right-hand side of a couple of those projects that are now at substantial completion, waiting for final works such as some fine grading and sodding and seeding to then be opened up to the public. We also do have 3 major trail connections that we are into detailed design work with, and will be hoping to complete in 2019 as well. So continuing the momentum moving forward of very aggressive parks delivery. We should mention that we do work with our development industry and work to deliver the park in our communities at a 50% occupancy. So we work very closely with CIES and IT, and we do monitor our development dashboard quite diligently to ensure that once that 50% occupancy is hit, we're working with the developer to ensure that the park is in the ground and nearing substantial completion and then operations. So moving forward into 2019 as well, a focus on redeveloping our existing parks. CPRC worked with finance and the development industry, and we built into our development charge a revitalization of our existing community parks. These are very much destination parks that are not only servicing those existing communities, but they are servicing all of the town-wide communities, and these are our larger parks that we have set for redevelopment. Shown here is Queensville Park and Mount Albert Park, which are 2 of our larger parks and parks amenities, providing an important service to all our residents. An update on our Operations Center project. At the last CWC meeting, staff reported out that the project for the first phase was substantially complete within the assigned schedule and under the budget that was allocated for the project. We are looking forward to tendering the project 3rd week in February. So we're looking at releasing the tender in the 3rd week of February for approximately 6 weeks. That tender will be open, then closing the tender and reporting back to council on the results. And then we are looking at potential construction of the project, obviously subject to council approval and including the detailed funding strategy into 2019 and 2020. with occupancy targeted for 2020. Our Health and Active Living Plaza project set for a 16-acre site that is fully earthworked and serviced up in Queensville. Health and Active Living Plaza concept is convenient and complementary services under one roof, through one door, providing a collection of high-value services for our residents, from parks and recreation services to community services, aquatic services, library, arts and culture. The non-parks and rec services, obviously, with a collection of different community partners. We now have developed partnerships with 18 different community partners. Originally, the project started at 12 community partners, and it has since grown to 18. And I'm sure by the time we cut the ribbon and open the doors, we may even have more than that. So we're happy to be working with MJM Architects, and that this firm is one of the leading architectural firms in Canada for parks and recreation and library spaces. So we're thrilled to be working with that group. MJM will be providing an update and an orientation presentation to Council at CWC on March 5th. So we're looking forward to them making that presentation to Council and undertaking the design into 2019. And we're already starting to schedule in with them the public outreach sessions that we're going to be having in each of the communities and with all of our different community stakeholders. Moving forward into 2020, we've targeted pre-qualification of our general contractors, and then into 2020 and 2021, some tendering, some construction works to prepare the site for facility construction with the general contractor, and then fixed facility construction into 2022 with potential occupancy 2022, possibly spilling over into 2023. There is an asterisk up there. I should highlight that this is obviously subject to council approvals and funding strategy, and as well very closely tied to the operational threshold of 40,000 residents, making it affordable, and linking the operations to that population threshold ensures our responsible operations and financial sustainability. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Questions? Very exciting times in East Gwillimbury right
Yes.
now. It really is. I'm not seeing any questions. I'm sure they'll find you later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam
Mr.
Mayor.
Webster?
As we move towards our pipes and water and road exciting area as well, I guess Mr. Molinari is going to, if you want to take the podium and introduce your team, that would be great. And there's a lot of detailed slides in here, as pipes design does need, and I'm going to ask the team to keep it fairly high level. We have a number of areas still to go, and we're doing our best to try to have this conclude around 12:30 or so. So that's where we are, Madam Mayor. So I'll ask Mr. Molinari to kick this section off.
Thanks, Tom. Well, and Aaron, I guess I understand people might be moving here for the parks, but we thought it was because the pipes were so tight. But we'll find out who's the correct one on that. But anyway, in order for CIS to effectively manage growth, there's a number of key elements that have to be in place. We have to have good master plans that effectively look at our infrastructure and plan for the needs that are going to be coming our way. Secondly, we need to have good people managing growth and the designs and implementing the construction that goes along with that growth. And thirdly, we need to have a really good way of warehousing the information that comes forward and being able to store that so that it can be easily retrieved, and it's there for our operations staff to be able to effectively operate those that infrastructure and facilities going forward. So today with me I have Ray Rosala, who's our senior engineering tech. and Denny Boskovsky, our Manager of Asset Management and Capital Projects, and they'll be walking through the slides for our area.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, Madam Mayor and members of council. My first slide today is to talk about master plan updates. In CIES, we currently have 2 master plan updates well underway and 1 proposed master plan update that we'd like to initiate and recommend as part of the 2020 capital budget process. The master plans we currently have underway include the Transportation Master Plan as well as the Water and Wastewater Master Plan. These 2 will serve to identify long-term servicing strategies for current and future populations using the town's growth projections to the 2041 planning horizon. These master plans are being prepared in accordance with the municipal class environmental assessment process, and we intend to host our combined second public information center at the next town open house in April. This second public information center will display recommended preferred alternatives and will be made available to the public for feedback before being finalized later in 2019. As for the proposed master plan we hope to initiate in 2020, this will be our Stormwater Management Master Plan update. The objectives of this master plan will be to provide long-term recommendations to prevent flooding, mitigate changes in water balance, and reduce phosphorus loadings to Lake Simcoe, as well as assess erosion issues and maintain or improve water quality. Up on the screen, we've got our priority employment land servicing strategy, specifically looking at wastewater servicing for the Green Lane and 404 employment lands. This has been a multi-year strategy that has looked at a large number of ultimate wastewater servicing strategies. Although all or most of the alternatives are physically possible from an engineering perspective, it has been critical to create a solution that meets the town's short and long-term goals. This has been difficult as it is unclear how development in that area will be implemented. With the secondary plan in this area not complete, it adds to the uncertainty. Given this uncertainty, the strategy you see on the screen provides what we believe are the best short and long-term objectives for the town. The flows would travel along Green Lane into the Sharon Trunk sewer, point that out, and up into the Sharon Trunk, where it'd be pumped from Second Con to the Newmarket pumping station. The strategy has been validated within our ongoing master plan and is currently inserted into our current development charge bylaw update. In addition, CIS staff are available to look at interim options with property owners interested in advancing portions of this network. This slide deals with the same employment corridor, however focuses on the water servicing component, which is significantly less complicated than determining the wastewater network. I'll start off by identifying the regional trunk water main projects in this corridor. There is the stretch of trunk water main along Green Lane between Yonge Street and Leslie Street. That's the one on the bottom there. And that is identified within the region's 10-year capital forecast, specifically with a construction start date of 2024. Additionally, the region's water wastewater master plan identifies a trunk water main outside of their 10-year forecast, which would span along Woodbine from just north of Davis Drive to Queensville Side Road. Lastly, you can see one of the many stretches of town trunk water main proposed along Doane Road near the town's operations center site. It's right within there, which would ideally be installed during York Region's reconstruction and widening of Doane Road from Yonge Street to Highway 404. Next, we've got our Holland Landing employment lands, which is part of our long-term servicing strategy. The map you see identifies the employment and commercial lands in this community, and the properties outlined with the hatching signifies the properties that currently have water and wastewater servicing up to the properties that were installed through development. We've also identified a stretch of future water and wastewater projects along Holland Landing Road to provide full servicing up to these employment lands, at which point they will be responsible to extend the services across and into their properties. The water supply for this area comes from the regional wells in Holland Landing and Queensville. and they're located just off of this map, these map extents, specifically off of Holland River Boulevard and off of Mount Albert Road, west of Second Con. On this slide, you can find our long-term servicing strategy for the Queensville employment lands. In this map, you can see the regional wells in the Queensville area. Now, these are located at Doane Road and Leslie Street, around there, and additionally at Woodbine and Queensville Side Road. Lastly, a very significant piece that you are all aware of is the Water Reclamation Center. This is expected to be located north of Queensville Side Road off of 2nd Concession Road, so at the top there, and will be covered in more detail later in our presentation. Now on to my last slide, Leslie Street servicing. As we already know, the Phase 1 wastewater servicing up to Vince's Market is well underway. The stretch of sanitary on Judah Doane Way between Beachboro Crescent and Leslie Street was installed late last year. So that's this stretch here. Along with the service lateral for the Civic Center. Town staff are currently working to expedite the final leg of servicing up Leslie Street into Vince's Market, at which point the system will become operational. The next potential phase of servicing within Area A is located between Judah Doane Way and would terminate approximately 300 meters south of Mount Albert Road, pending fronting landowner interest in funding this project. So that'd be this section here. Lastly, south of these map extents are areas B and C, which each have their own outlet and are not dependent on each other or Area A. Until allocation is available, or further allocation is available, it is unlikely that these landowners will want to proceed at this time. Now, unless you have any questions, up next I'd like to introduce Denny Boskovsky, our Asset Management and Capital Project Manager. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and members of Council. It is my absolute pleasure to speak to you today on the next 3 slides. So asset management, we've been doing a lot of work in this area. At the previous growth management workshops, we've talked about acquiring the resources and building the system. And the system is built, and we are making it do work for us. We are implementing best practices. We are automating business processes, adding intelligence to our decision-making processes, and adding value to the overall work we do. We are integrating it with corporate systems, and we are reaping the benefits of that. Our operational services are having better information at their fingertips through better winter operations mapping, and also using the data to improve their recoveries through development. And you're going to be seeing future reports from us this year with respect to the LED streetlight strategy, the town's first pavement management system, and consolidating the traffic and parking bylaw and automating that entire process. And we are ready for the new asset management regulation. So our next slide is the Highway 400 and 404 connecting link, aka the Bradford Bypass. So just an overview, it's a 16.2 kilometer long rural 4-lane controlled access highway. And covering it from west to east, it starts at Highway 400 and links to Highway 404 with full interchanges. Here's the green one. That's much brighter. With a full interchange at Highway 400 in Bradford, as well as at Yonge Street in Bradford. Moving into the EG, we have a full interchange at Bathurst, a partial interchange at Leslie Street, and a full interchange at Highway 404. Its current status, the MOE approved the EA in 2002, and it's still valid. In 2004, it was designated as a controlled access highway. That's important because it protects for the corridor and influences requirements on adjacent development applications. In 2017, it was added to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which is a key planning document for the province and very much influences our planning policies. And to date, it remains an unfunded project. So what is required to make this happen? Well, funding and programming the work, first and foremost, finishing the EA conditions of approval, undertaking the preliminary and detailed engineering design, property acquisitions where required, likely building the structures, the bridges in advance, and utility relocations. From a construction perspective specifically, we don't know how it's going to be implemented. We don't know if it will be built in its entirety or in phases. We don't know the procurement model. We don't know if it would be built under a more traditional design and then construction contract process, or if it's a P3 model. And we also don't know if it would be a toll highway or a free-for-use highway. So the Upper York sewer solution and the deferral of servicing impacts. So just to give you a brief background on this. In 2009, the region began working on the Upper York solution. And the original intent was to build a trunk sewer that took our flows and moved them south to the York-Durham solution and connected to the York-Durham solution. In 2010, the minister amended the terms of reference and asked York Region to consider a solution that kept water from the Lake Simcoe watershed and had it stay in the Lake Simcoe watershed. And that's how the Water Reclamation Center was actually born. It's a solution that accomplishes that. From 2010 through to 2014, the individual EA started and finished, and at the end of 2014, it was filed with the minister. In 2016, MOE completed their review and confirmed that all requirements were met. In 2016 to the present, the province is undertaking their duty to consult with an Indigenous peoples. So as a result of the delay, the town is actively in discussions with the region and stakeholders to identify opportunities for additional servicing capacity. So, as previously noted, we have 900 additional units through 2 key projects in Aurora, upgrading of the existing Aurora pumping station, and building a new one. And the region expects that allocation, along with those improvements, to be in place between 2021 and 2022. Other means are being reviewed, including consideration of using pipe storage capability within the Sharon Trunk Sewer, and interim servicing using spare capacity in Newmarket's local sanitary sewer system for some of the 404 employment lands. And that concludes my part of the presentation.
Thank you. Councillor Persicini.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the extension from 404 to the 400, what path would that be taken to go there? Is it the old, is it 888, or where's it going to join? Is that a brand new area if they propose to go across to from 404 to the 400? Whereabouts would that be going across? Thank you.
Okay. Through you, Madam Mayor. What I'll do is I'll just come back to that slide. The red line is actually the alignment that's been struck through the EA, and it doesn't follow any existing road corridors. It looks to be its own corridor that is actually cut between various concession lots. Okay.
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Boskovsky. My understanding was that the EA that was conducted for this project is a little dated, and that it that if things were to move forward on this, that the EA would have to be, I guess, refreshed. Is that still the case, or does it stand the way? Is it still a valid EA, I guess, is the best question to ask.
Mm-hmm. Through you, Madam Mayor. The EA is very much valid. The provincial level of government Their rules for undertaking EAs are slightly different from ours. And for them to consider to have completed an EA, they don't have to go through every step of the way. They can finish it to the point where a preliminary or a corridor is established, and they can protect for it. The EA itself, and if the conditions of the EA require them to do further planning work, including their archaeological studies and what have you, their impact to the natural heritage environment, those are requirements they still have to fulfill.
So it's a preliminary EA that is subject to further study.
Correct.
Thank
Correct.
you.
Councillor Crothers.
Thank you. I have a couple questions on the Upper York sewage solution. Same question as Councillor Roy DiClemente. When do the EAs expire on that? Because that's been in the works for a while.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I am not sure when the EA would expire because it hasn't been approved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other question was around the concept that some of our water, trying to repatriate water to the watershed that it came from. Do you know what percentage of our water comes from Lake Ontario? Because we are currently getting some of our drinking water from Lake Ontario and some from wells in the Lake Simcoe watershed. So do you have a breakdown on what that is? Or is that something you can get for us?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't have that breakdown with me right now. It is something I can get for you.
That would be good to see. Thank you.
Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to our presenter. Thank you very much. Very informative. A couple of thoughts. Just did a quick calculation on Google Maps. I think it's about a 20-kilometer distance between the 400 to the 404, give or take. That, my understanding, when we did the extension to the 404, it cost millions of dollars. Given that the province right now, who I'm presuming would be funding this, is looking under sofa cushions for change and everything they can get their hands on, strapped for cash, I'm just trying to be realistic here. What is the probability that this is going to happen anytime soon? Maybe it's not a fair question to you, but I'll ask it.
Yeah. Through you, Madam Mayor. That's a tough question to answer. If the province so chooses to make it a toll highway, I'm sure it could happen quite quickly. 407 is a great example of that. That happened really fast.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, that's kind of my suspicion of where it may be going, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Just as long as we don't sell it. My second question is about the EA on the Upper York. I've talked to various people, some who were in the cabinet of the former government, provincial government, other folks here, about Indigenous consultation. And I think that's incredibly important that we do that. Some have said it's been done, others have said it hasn't. I think it's a constitutional requirement, actually. Can you give me your perspective on what has been done around Indigenous consultation? Thank you.
Okay. Through you, Madam Mayor. Town staff are not privy to the actual discussions. We understand that it has taken place and continues to take place. Beyond that, we don't have any other details.
I might suggest that now that we have new members of council, that we take the opportunity to invite back the regional people that are involved with it and have them present at one of our council meetings, committee of the whole, or perhaps it might even be a separate a workshop in itself. I see Mr. Webster's got his pen out, marking it down. Thank you. I think that's the right way to get a lot more detailed information, although sitting at the region right now, there seems to be no new information coming forward at all. So. Yes, go ahead, Mr.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I can give a little bit on that, but I think your suggestion to get an update from the region is probably a good one. But essentially, there was consultation with the Indigenous community through the original EA. And now that it's gone back to the province for signing, the province also has a duty to consult. And so that's triggering a new consultation period as well. So there has been consultation through the EA process, but now the province also has a duty to consult. And I think that's where some of the confusion sometimes lies.
Thank you very much. Chief, we're still fresh. We're still good to go.
Apparently, I need a microphone. In keeping with the high-level overview, these next dozen or so slides we'll go through. I don't think anything here is going to be an epiphany for anybody, but I would be remiss if I didn't note staff, two of which are behind me with Jennifer and Ryan. But various staff and in collusion with different departments have really done a great job the last few years in turning emergency services into a fact-driven, thoughtful, and really managed entity as we move through this, albeit exciting, high growth and changing emergency service and community safety services service levels. So here we go. Not surprising to most, if not all, we've placed a priority on lines 1 and 2 of defense, which is the proactiveness of education and prevention. Over the years, we've increased our menu of programs from about a handful 5 or so years ago to well over 3 dozen today and growing, all tied to our key performance indicators as through budget, current council and past councils have always seen we have committed to, and that's the 10%. Our public education programs involve everybody, not just our specialist full-time people, but our paid on call and full-time crews. And we reach out to a variety of not only faith-based and community-orientated, but schools, which have seen a real growth. And going forward, I'm really looking forward to this Business First General Manager Valchech, because we have a real opportunity with the business community to talk about things like preparedness and recovery from disasters and calamities that may fall under the emergency management purview. Often we talk about, well, what are the number of incidents? The blue line is the general incidents since 2013. You can see we haven't had a spike. There's no science to it, but with the growth, we haven't seen a huge spike. That's not to say we don't monitor it. However, like response times, total incidents don't really tell the whole story. So the bar chart gives you an idea of per incident. We have not just one, but sometimes there may be 3 or more vehicles on the road, and this is a risk management to the town. And it also is an indicator of what we need to look at with regards to our fleet and fleet maintenance and fuel costs. So we're really using this data to paint a much more appropriate picture and masterpiece than just the vignettes of a few data points like total incidents and response times. Something new that we're moving towards is these operational dashboards. And I won't go through the whole thing. You will see this more in the future. But it really is some key components that we look at. Some are response times, types of calls, and our turnout times. So we really try and focus on the things that we have control of, and that's getting firefighters on the trucks and out to the call as quickly as possible. And the great thing about this, the underlying piece, is that instead of information that's months, maybe a year old, we can turn this around thanks to staff in a matter of days and weeks. So look forward to this and more of this in the future. Our fire master plan, which was completed about 18 months ago and approved more recently, is a 10-year reinvigoration of the preceding master fire plan. You should note, for those that are new to council, that this has been posted on our website. I double-checked with Corp Comms for the past year and a half. And that 10-year fire master plan to approximately 2028, 2027, talks about the things that we look at and the use of data, and it doesn't, and it intentionally doesn't tie things like a new fire station to a date. It ties it to things like presenting the data, collecting and presenting the data, and giving options to council to make decisions to when we do adjust our levels of service, our staff and material, which includes equipment as well as bricks and mortar. It does talk about, and again, not an epiphany, no surprise, we talked about it in budget, the consideration of a 4th fire station along the Green Lane corridor with the growth. That will happen in the fullness of time, and certainly with many more of these presentations with fact-based rationale. However, as discussed in council recently with budget, land banking and looking at building sometime within that 10-year master fire plan is likely the result. Heat maps. This is an example of but one of a suite of heat maps we have. And although it very intuitively shows you what our calls, in this case, are motor vehicle collisions, on where they are, if it seems simple, well then great, that's achieved the objective. But really the story behind this is the data that supports it to show us in retrospectives as we collect these and do have a suite of these heat maps over the years to show us and give us fact-based input as to where we're likely going to see the growth or the needs. Bottom left, not surprisingly, that's the Green Lane corridor. So it's not all just about fire, of course. We do include bylaws, and not surprisingly, the tempo of operations and the requirements have gone up. So this gives you a quick snapshot of what's happening in bylaws. Bylaws also follows the template of the proactiveness of education and prevention. And the good news story is that bylaws isn't just all about punitive and ticketing. It really is the community outreach, and our officers are spending time doing that as well, with the help of corporate communications, getting the information out. A good slide with a lot of information on it, something hitherto now not seen at council, but really gives you an idea, not just the time of year, the months and the surge times, but the kind of calls and types that they respond to. Property standards. The point of this slide here is that there is a lot of effort and time spent by staff in encouraging clients, encouraging repeatedly and often, encouraging them that they are members of the community and the importance of their sites, whether it's property standards in a residential or a commercial operation. And here's a good example of something that, working together with a client, resulted in a very nice outcome. We have many more examples. This is but one. That's it. Unless there's any questions, I'll move on to human resources.
Thank you. Questions? Councilor Ridley Clemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Chief Dawson, you referenced doing some land banking as part of the provisions of the master plan. Do you require council authorization to go out shopping, or is this something that, because the master plan's been approved and there is a long-term vision, that you, should something come up, that you can bring it forward to us, or do you need us to give you that authorization?
And through the chair, thank you for that question. As I recall through budget discussion, this was a topic, and so direction was given by council to that would be on the radar and the focus of the growth. That's why it's here today. And with the support of senior CAO and senior staff, I know, working with Jim Marco, we are looking down that road, and somewhere along the Green Lane corridor, banking 1 to 2 acres with the vision that 1 acre would be the minimum that we could build on. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Can't see the light from there, but we can see it from here. You're good.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and appreciate your time here today. So what we're going to talk about is the people factor. I know my colleagues, they feel that maybe their departments are the most important, but I'm here to tell you that the people factor is quite important here at the town, and I wanted to share some information with you here today. We actually utilize the Shamrock model when we resource for our positions, which has proven to be effective as we both prepare for and in the midst of our growth. So we want to talk about that today, and I have some examples up here that we're going to share and discuss. This just-in-time hiring allows for resources of positions at peak times and resourcing to market conditions, which we know is very important as we go through our growth phase. So here's some real-life examples up here on the screen. Today actually is a very good example of how we utilize staff in both a full-time capacity, and we have seasonal roads operators out there taking care of our streets as we speak. And that's in order to service our growing community as roads become assumed and we meet the challenging conditions or changing conditions. Of course, you can see up on the screen there up to the left, I believe, in our CPR branch, we have both contract and seasonal employers hired to assist when servicing is required, such as we know, early spring, which is coming. We know it'll be here, which will prepare our parks and our trails and beautify EG with planters. And we really enjoy seeing that when that happens throughout the town. Summertime, as you can see, we have a picture of our camp counselors up there, and they take care of running our camps for our young residents, and these camps actually have grown significantly over the last few years as our community has grown. So another example of how we utilize staff in various capacities as our community grows. We also increased our types of camps as well over the years. Students, which are in the bottom left or right there, we have some students. We are very proud to support college and university co-op programs in many service areas such as engineering, planning, and HR. We've had a few students over the years, so it's great to have them. These programs allow both the bringing of students' knowledge, skills, and abilities to us, which is new skills and abilities they bring, and an opportunity for resourcing, for us to again resource at peak times of the year. So another good example of how we utilize the Shamrock model. Contract staff as well. For when positions become vacant, we often think and decide about how we're going to fill them. And quite often we will fill these positions with experienced individuals to provide a mentoring role and opportunity for our staff within our departments. And when we have service areas that are fluctuating to the growth. For example, in our building and engineering branches, we've utilized contract staff that have come to us with years of experience and been able to mentor our staff. Not to forget, in the bottom center there, our customer service team. They play a very vital role in as we grow, as they welcome new residents and stay in tune with the changes and tracking issues that are happening within our corporation. I hope this has demonstrated for you the Shamrock approach, which is quite, in my opinion, innovative and effective for us in our people managing. When determining the best approach for filling positions, you'll often actually hear us in the hallways of EG saying, "Let's Shamrock it." And you can actually hear us say that, for sure. Okay. So next slide. I want to talk to you today about the Inclusion Charter, another exciting initiative that is within our community, and we'll be hearing more about it in the future. As we know, as our community grows, the demographics change, and they're changing all around us. York Region is one of the fastest growing... Oh, it's okay. No worries. York Region is one of the fastest growing and most diverse communities in Canada, and that's according to the census of 2016. 1.2 million people call York Region their home as of 2016. We know that's growing. This represents all ages, backgrounds, and interests. Our community includes people who speak over 120 different languages and come from about 230 distinct ethnic groups. So very fascinating and interesting. Hence, the Inclusion Charter for York Region has been developed by the group called the Municipal Diversity and Inclusion Group, which I've been and been participating on since 2016, and quite proud to represent EG on this committee. This actually includes, that you can see up on the screen, about 20 member stakeholder groups, and they vary from school boards, municipalities, York Regional Police, and so on, and hospitals. So it's a very diverse group, and this group has been together to work on creating what we call an inclusion charter. The charter model was identified as an effective way to respond positively to rapidly changing demographics and provide a framework for promoting programs, services, and facilities, and within our workplace that include all people and include inclusivity. So this approach offers many benefits, including higher employee engagement, greater opportunity to success, retain staff, innovative thinking, and most importantly, create greater customer service experiences for our residents. That's really the key to all of this. We want to let you know that we will be presenting more information regarding the endorsement of our inclusive charter for EG in the very near future. So we want to bring this to your attention and let you know this is a very important factor as we move towards growth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do you have any idea how many different languages we speak in this building, or are those that are out in the community as well?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. I'm going to say within our workplace community, our staff speak well over 10 different languages, and we actually do track this, and we utilize their services when required through our customer service team. If there's an issue or a request for discussion in a different language, we utilize our staff in that manner. So definitely it's something that we make sure we take care of. Did I answer your other question about the community?
What I meant was not just staff that are in the building here, but those that are out in the community as well, working outside of the office here.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd say at this point that is growing significantly, and I'm thinking 5 or 10 different types of languages, but that is something that we will make sure we present to you and council at the Inclusion Charter presentation when that comes forward to you.
Wonderful, thank you. Not seeing any questions. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Persichini.
Just a note in my brain here. I'm just thinking on the police department, when I was with the police service board, we had many languages that we spoke, and on our service desk, if someone can't speak a certain language, they call in and whatever. We do have, obviously, you said you have 10 different people could call them back or deal with it, right?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, absolutely. And it's actually, I've experienced a situation, I know Director Hanna can speak to that as well, where we've definitely spoken to residents and answered their questions in different types of languages when required. So it's something we definitely are doing, and we know it's something we need to pay attention to more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Monica. Oh, it's afternoon. Good morning, afternoon. Good to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. The library has seen a growth in our memberships, our program attendance, and changes in demand and expectations in what our community needs from their library. The shift continues to be with access to digital content, demand for STEM skill development, which stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, and we are anticipating growth in our multicultural resources and programming. Just a quick review of some of our growth areas. The two key areas that we saw in 2018 was in program attendance, which increased by 21%, and then our digital checkouts, which increased by 14%. Of note is how many new memberships we've issued in 2017 versus in 2018. So in 2017, we saw a 10% increase in new memberships issued, and last year we saw an 18% increase in new memberships issued. Now, of significance for us is our active membership increase at 28% in 2018. So what this means is people who are actually coming in and using their library card. So we're seeing more active users in our community with their library. The chart that you see on the slides indicates where our users are coming from. So you see Mount Albert does have the highest number of users. However, Holland Landing Library is the catchment for Sharon, Queensville, and Harvest Hills. So that chart is a little bit deceiving. Now, when we track where our users have grown since 2017, we did see a 30% increase in members registering from Sharon and a 50% increase in members registering from Queensville, which is no surprise considering the development that we see in these areas. The three areas where we've seen significant growth and interest in the library has been with digital literacy, adult participation, and school partnerships. Now, as I mentioned, we did see a 21% increase overall in program attendance last year, and I'll just touch on a few of the highlights. The one area that we've spoken before is our TD Summer Reading Club, and this is a very significant number for us. We had a 47% increase in participation, and even more significant is we had an almost 100% engagement rate. So what this means is almost every single child who registered for the program came into the library to log their books. Now, the TD Summer Reading Club is a national reading program from coast to coast, and it is sponsored by TD Bank, and it is offered for free in all public libraries. Of our participants, we had almost 50% of new registrants to the EG Club. So this tells us that our new residents are familiar with this club from their local libraries, and we're seeking it, actively seeking it here in EG. The library assumed the operations of South Lake Cinemania, which is a TIM film circuit. Now, we do not track the demographics of our moviegoers. However, anecdotally, we have noticed a change in demographics since late 2017, with many more young couples attending. We have been using social media very heavily to target a wider audience, and we've assumed that with the more affordable housing here in EG, younger couples are coming up, moving up from the city, and they're looking for interesting cultural things to do. The library has also seen increased demand in our school programs, especially in terms of digital literacy. So what we've done is we've simplified how we offer this, and we offer schools a menu of programs that are available from the library, and the classes can then select what they want to learn, and we will then deliver these programs in the classroom. One area of growth that we are seeing in our community is diversity. The pie charts that you see on the slides represents the percentages of diversity we see in EG and in Newmarket. This is based on census data from 2016. So while we do have, our population is lower than that of Newmarket, we do see the same patterns. Now, it is expected that our population will continue to grow in these patterns. Library use across cultures is different, and it is important for us to be aware of how our customers use the library to ensure that we can ensure inclusivity. For example, we may have a customer who is hesitant to register for a library card because they are unsure of how this data is stored. But what we see is them sitting in our library, reading newspapers, and attending our non-registered programs. Or we may have a family of 5 or 6 and only one library card for that entire family. What we've done in the library is we've tracked languages spoken with our staff. So we have staff who speak Urdu, Cantonese, Spanish, French, and Czech. And we also know what our users are asking for. And what our users are asking for are similar to the languages that we see on the pie charts. Last year, we ran an around-the-world program for children in the summer where we used technology tools and integrated to learn about different cultures. The library also offers a technology class and story time program to Blue Door Shelter, which is a family shelter. Now, at least 70% of the residents in this shelter are newcomers to Canada with significant language barriers. So we've also left a selection of books at the shelter so the residents there can have easy access to literacy materials. And further to this, we have added a membership class in our library cards to ensure that residents of group homes can get a library card without the barrier of requiring a fixed address. The library last year also partnered with the Library Settlement Partnership to offer English conversation circles. We currently have around 3 dozen ESL learning resources in our collection. We offer Mango Languages, which is an online language learning database for both English speakers looking to learn another language and then vice versa. So this resource can be used for a Cantonese speaker looking to learn how to use English so they can navigate it successfully. We also offer a health database, which is offered in 27 different languages. And by the end of this year, we will launch a multilingual collection with a primary focus on adult content, and then we'll develop that further to expand into children's content. Public libraries are mirrors to the community that they serve, and we are looking forward to meeting our new residents and ensuring that we are aligned to meet their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Any questions? Thank you very much. Very complete.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, and members of the public who have stuck with us this morning. Thank you. We're close to wrapping up here. So today you've heard a lot about the development of the community, the physical aspects of growth, but I'm here to talk about the human side of that, which Michelle and Monica have already touched on a little bit. It's about community engagement and building relationships with the new residents as they enter our community. So we're going to start with customer service, and how I wanted to phrase this conversation was looking at the growth pendulum. So in 2016, we were at the planning phase of growth. So really, it starts out with the planning department being the main focus and developing the communities and the outlines of what those will be looking like. And we deal with builders and developers at that point. There isn't really the customers coming into the front desk. In 2016 to 2018, that changed. As residents started to take occupancy and we shifted more towards the development and the engineering side of things, we began to see residents coming into the community and coming to customer service. And a lot of the trends we had at that time were questions about parking on the streets when there's construction. There's usually dust issues. So it was a lot of engineering, and we would connect in with the inspectors at that time. We also had questions about supplementary taxes. So for those of you who aren't aware, supplementary taxes are the taxes that you would receive following occupancy in your home. So how it works is when you move into a new home, you will receive tax bills based on the land assessment value only. So these could be significantly lower than what your tax bill may be after. So after MPAC assesses your home, which could be up to 18 months later, you will receive the supplementary tax bill 18 months after it would have been originally due. So those can be big tax bills. So what we wanted to do is work with residents to ensure that they understood that process and that they had education right from day one that these tax bills would be coming. So we have some communication tools that I'll talk about in just a moment. So now as we welcome into 2019, we are moving along on the pendulum again. So now that a lot of the construction is complete in some of these communities, the resident interests and trends we're seeing coming in at customer service are growing and changing again. It's more about service based at this point, so questions about parks, questions about parking, and items such as that. And as we move forward, one of the other major trends that we're seeing is a lot of residents that are coming into East Gwillimbury are looking for the online access to pay their bills online, to check their accounts online for tax and water bills, which is available in some of the bigger municipalities that we're finding a lot of the residents are moving from. And so we're looking at that moving forward as putting in some tools that would help us meet these needs. So looking from a communications perspective, again, in 2016, we worked to begin interacting and engaging with these new residents that were coming into East Gwillimbury. We established several relationships with a formalized program that would help us to begin sharing information with residents. It was really a two-pronged approach. So firstly, it was a partnership with Welcome Wagon. So we have residents moving in throughout the community, not just into newly built homes. So we built a relationship there where anyone who chose to have that come to their home could contact Welcome Wagon, and we supplied them with the documents that we felt would be necessary. And we also built a relationship with our building community and our developers to deliver a welcome package to residents that moved into our newly built homes specifically. So how that partnership worked was when a home received an occupancy permit, we would have to drop off blue bins and green bins to each home. With that drop off would also be a welcome bag that had contents from municipal partners and from the town within it. One of the main pieces in that bag was our welcome home guide, which you can see here. To date, we've distributed about 2,500 bags, which would be similar to the occupancy rate. And we're working on an updated version of this guide with feedback from residents. So we have an online survey that let residents have the opportunity to let us know within these books what was helpful, what wasn't, what could we do to update for the next iteration of residents. And just for interest's sake, the top 4 areas that residents indicated as the most helpful within this guide was the tax and water bill info, which would include that supplementary tax bill information, the community resources, so that section talks about where could they go to get more information. If they're new to Canada, we had some information there, information about York Region, and where they can go to get information about the town. We also have a section about who's responsible. So when you move into a newly built community, the town hasn't assumed the roads. So who takes care of that? So we had a whole section that outlined the various areas in their neighborhood and where they could go for more information, and what to do about deficiencies in your new home. So we went through the whole aspect of moving into a newly built home and covered off everything that we thought would be important for our residents. So you'll see an updated version of this coming out shortly. So the town's also made an effort to create additional communication pieces. As I mentioned before, the supplementary tax bills. This was a brochure that's sent out with every tax bill that was land only. So another piece that we've done to try and create that relationship and get communications pieces out right before. And I would just like to draw your attention to the quote on the bottom there. That actually came in with the newly built home guide survey. So we know that our residents are reading it and really looking forward to growing with the town.
Thank you, team, and Laura for that finish. We're just concluding now the public session. Madam Mayor, may I suggest we did have an in-camera session planned for today that dealt with some real estate matters and whatnot. I don't think they're that time sensitive. We do have our regular council and committee meeting scheduled for next Wednesday. That's a little change because of Family Day. I'm suggesting that we maybe put that over to the next week. So this is really our concluding slide. And as a team, we sat down and tried to come up with what are really those 10 things that are the biggest opportunities and challenges for us moving forward. And it's really sort of a combination of maybe the new growth and the existing community, if you look at sort of the balance there. The reason we picked the first one is it's not too often you build a major facility, at least in our community. We haven't built a lot of facilities, and this is looking almost at concurrently building two. And under our CPRC group, we're looking shortly at awarding the new operations center, and I believe that's in the magnitude of 15 to 20 million, that potential build. Followed shortly thereafter with the Queensville Healthy Active Living Plaza, which is another very significant municipal build, and those certainly require a good team approach. We're hearing loud and clear from the council that residential growth, we can put a big check mark on that one, and we're moving along in 1/3 of our way through, but really time to focus on economic development and job creation, and that with our Business First programs a real priority for our staff team. The connection of communities and some of our really important updates being our DC update, our master plan updates, and our official plan updates, all occurring concurrently, are real important elements that we get right. Future servicing challenges, and I think, again, we've seeing Upper York and the frustrations dealing with that long process, but also looking at alternatives as well. Improving and streamlining business processes, and something as simple as what the staff we're hiring are seeing better practices and more modern practices that have been dealt with elsewhere, and modernizing the way we will get submissions from builders and people seeking building permits that will allow us to be more efficient and actually eliminate future staff hires potentially by just doing things better with our existing team. The customer service end that we just talked about, but I think that's going to be continually a real priority for and council has again stressed to us is it's an important thing that we continue to engage and enhance our residents and stakeholders and how we interact. The heritage list, General Manager Ramuno spoke of it, again, is clearly a priority. Asset management, we got a lot of new facilities and wonderful things happening, which are new, but the replacement and mindful funding of them is a challenge. One that we haven't mentioned, which is clearly right on the a priority item right now, is the independent review provincial government's undertaking with 2 facilitators, and where they're looking at regional governance review across the Greater Toronto area, and the role we'll play in that. And then the final one is reflective of our changing community and our changing organization, the importance of inclusivity and diversity. And so those were our attempt at 10. We're certainly open for discussion and direction and input from both council and residents on this. Have we got them right? Are we missing ones? But that's sort of where we are today. And we conclude this this session, Madam Mayor. Apologize that it went a little over our time, but I think it was a pretty fulsome update that was prepared by the staff team today.
Thank you very much. I think this has captured a lot of the discussion that we've had in the last few months, and much greater than that. And we probably could add another 10. Depending on the day and time, but I think that that list certainly captured some of the main discussions that we have had, both internally and externally. There are a couple there that, while they're on the list and they're very important to us, they're out of our control. They're in someone else's hands, and so we work with them, and we wait and hope that they can work along with us to make a difference. So, I really want to thank all of staff. I think all the staff have stayed here. Really appreciate the time and effort put into this. This is a lot of material. I looked both ways a couple of times, and people were very engaged, and they glazed a little, and then they were back again. And it's a lot of material to absorb. It is a wonderful tool for us now to continue to use in months and even a year or two from now to measure where we are today and where we're going to be around the next corner. So thank you for all your efforts. I know that it took a lot of time to put it together, and some of you were rushed, but it is a very valuable tool for all of us, and I thank you for that. With that, we are not going into a closed session today, as indicated by our CAO. So with that, I will head down to a confirming bylaw. Go ahead.
Before we get to that point, Madam Mayor, I'd suggest that you have a mover and seconder to receive the presentation.
Thank you. Received by Councillor Roy DiClemente and Councillor Crone. All those in favor? That's carried. We are now at a confirming bylaw, moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Persuccini. All those in favor? That's carried. And an adjournment today at 12:43, moved by Councillor Crothers, seconded by Councillor Roy DiClemente. All those in favor, and that is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for the audience being here today as well. It's always great to have the public here as well to listen to what we are doing on a daily basis. And with that, I will call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.